Hey guys, here's another video. This one's going to be going over anti-aircraft or AAA in maps. The gist of this one, it's a more advanced topic, but what we're going to do is create a template that we can use to activate anti-aircraft batteries when players come within a certain range and deactivate them as they leave. This is really useful for multiplayer maps. You can also use it in single player maps. I don't know if it's as necessary, but it's handy for whatever purpose you like. Now we're going to activate them at such a range that as soon as the players won't actually be able to tell this is taking place. This is more done to save resource utilization on multiplayer maps. Okay, so to start this off, essentially what we're first going to do is create a mission begin. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and zoom in pretty far because we're going to be laying down game mechanics. Might as well get as close as we can. So here we have mission begin, and as soon as the mission begins, we're going to set a timer here for about 6 seconds that will trigger, and that will activate a check zone. And so let's lay down the check zone. Now the check zone itself will set to about 7,000. And we'll set it to allies, so this would be for an Axis group of anti-aircraft batteries that are going to be firing at allied units. And the check zone we want to deactivate as soon as it spawns, so we're going to add a deactivate timer. And we're going to target link that to the check zone and then target link the check zone to the deactivate timer. So they pass input between the two of them. But before it actually deactivates the check zone, the check zone will send a couple other outputs as well. And one of them is to an activate timer. The other one is going to be to a just standard timer. We can set that for 1 second. That's fine. And we're going to make sure that this goes to another check zone. So we'll lay down a check zone here. And this one will be set to 7,500. And let's not forget that we need to trigger it for allies because it needs to respond to allied planes. So as soon as this check zone fires, it deactivates itself, enables another check zone here, and this check zone this is very important. The other thing we're going to do is uncheck distance type closer, and it's going to go to further. And so we enable that, and then we activate it using the 1 second timer. Now, what we did when we checked the distance type further is now that when something leaves this zone, it'll fire, not come into it. And if we zoom out, you can see here. So essentially what happens here is that as soon as we enter the inner circle, it fires. As soon as we leave the outer circle, it fires again. And we leave this buffer here because as planes go in and out, we don't want to overload the server with that. Especially in a multiplayer map, you might have someone riding along the line between these two zones, so you want to give some space so it doesn't happen too quickly. Okay, so we've done that. Now, we don't want this to only fire once, so we're also going to create an activate timer. But let's also not forget that we need to deactivate this one as well, like we did on the other. So as soon as it fires once, we want to deactivate it. And we want to add an activate timer so it itself could activate R in the opposing direction. And that is good. So we've kind of got a base framework here. Now, from here, a couple people do this different ways. Everybody has a different strategy or method to it. The way that I've done it allows me to utilize or have multiple AA batteries or objects of any kind in the game ride on this mechanic. But so from here, what we do is we create an enabler, activate another one, a separate one, that this would then activate. And let's go ahead and add in an MG34. This is a machine gun, right? And let's go ahead and we'll create a linked entity here, bring up its advanced properties window, and set it as German, because it's going to be firing at allies. Everything else looks right. By default, we'll say it's disabled. We don't want it to be there until people come in. Now, as soon as someone enters the zone, it'll enable it, okay? So we'll go ahead and object link with Shift-O and the green line, which is an object link. And so there we have that. Now, so it's going to activate it when someone comes in. That's great. But we also want it to shoot at things at in a certain area. So we'll add the attack area here. And we will make sure that this truck is a part of that area. And that needs to be triggered by the check zone here. We don't actually want it to be directly triggered because it could be missed when the enabler fires. So we'll go ahead and, what is it, 1492? We'll go ahead and remove that one. And we will say timer, which will fire this. And this timer will wait 1 second. And then it will fire the attack area. Now we'll set the attack area to, let's say 5,000. You can pick out more realistic times if you want, and a large number of minutes for it to do it. We want it to attack air targets, and priority is fine. Okay, so this will attack and we can also change the altitude of it. So we set it to about 5,000. We can let it be evaded about 1,000 feet off the ground at least. So I mean, at its peak, it could go up to 6,000, essentially. So it'll engage anything in that range, or it should. So from here, we have a plane will fly into this area and will activate our AA gun here, but it won't deactivate it. And so that's what we need to work out at this point. And in order to do that, we'll of course need to use a deactivate trigger here. And we'll need to make sure that this AA gun is a part of that. Now, we are also going to have to use something called a force complete. And make sure that that is set to high. And that will also need to be here. Now, from here, what we'll do is we'll have a little bit of a delay, a couple seconds. To the check zone, when they leave, we'll fire. Whoop. We'll fire, and it'll wait 2 seconds, and then it will fire the disabler. Now, it will immediately fire the force complete. So the first complete will make sure that this has stopped doing what it was initially doing, which was attacking that area, and then we'll disable it. And so now it is disabled. Hooray. So you should be able to fly in here, enable this AA gun as you fly in. It will fire at you if you're within 5,000 meters. And as you fly out past 7,500, radius of 7,500, it will trigger it to complete it and disable. And you shouldn't be able to see too much of this. It should be just at about your range of clipping vision in the game. You can increase or decrease this however you like. But what I've seen from on our forums and on other maps is this is kind of a general use case for this. Now, the cool thing here is, again, if we wanted to add another AA gun, we could. And all we need to do is just make sure all these things are linked to it, as you can see here. And there you have two that would initially fire as we enter. And so you can chain as many off this as you want. And the nice thing is you could have a large amount of AA. I like to do that. I like to put a large amount of AA on low. I find that the guys that I've flown with love it this way. They love to see the sky lit up with flak and cannon fire, so makes it more dramatic. Anyway, so you can add in here, and in my template, actually, I have about 12 different types of AA that I can delete as I don't need them. Now, another thing we could do for good measure is go ahead and add a counter in here. In this case, we have 2, so we can set it to 2, and we can right click and target this. Oop. Well, I think I selected the wrong thing, didn't I? Target. Or maybe not. Shift T. Come on. Oh. I know what I'm doing. I'm an idiot. Right click on killed event. Okay, so right click on killed event will give you this. This will fire. And when you get 2 of these, both of these have died, you can have this fire off a deactivate trigger here. And that deactivate trigger will go ahead and deactivate both your check zones. Now technically this one would already be deactivated, but I just for good measure. So what this means is as soon as the AA is all destroyed, the check zones are actually deactivated as well, and then almost all these mechanics are dormant at that point, which is what we want. It saves system resources, and this is a good thing. So this is the quick version of this. Now you can use this for patrols or all sorts of other things. The important mechanics that you're going to want to, essentially I could lay it out like this. The things below this counter here you could duplicate out, and we just would want to make sure it had all the right relationships to all these other things here. Okay, so a quick recap of everything we covered so far. As you can see here, this outer circle, that's our 7,500 meter check zone for when planes leave it. The one inside of that further circle is our 7,000 meter check zone for when planes enter. So as soon as a plane goes past this second inner circle here, it activates our AA. As soon as it leaves the outer, it's going to deactivate it. And then the center one that's at about 5,000 is going to be our attack zone or attack area. So this should allow a plane to fly in here, activate AA, not see it yet, but as soon as it comes into sight of it, it's going to look for that plane and attack it. And again, these are in spheres, so you need to remember that in a three-dimensional plane when you're using them. Now if we zoom in here, we can see the mechanics of what happened. Again, mission begins, a timer waits a little bit, check zone fires to activate. Now it's active. A plane flies in, it will deactivate this check zone, activate the further check zone, which will turn off our AA when it leaves, and it'll again deactivate it once it fires. Now also once this fires, it's going to, through a timer, actually activate it. So it's activated and then it's going to trigger it. But then it will also activate or enable our 2 AAs, and within a second or two tell them to attack that 5,000 meter check zone here. Also, there's a counter here. When these 2 are destroyed, it's going to deactivate both check zones. Now, once both are triggered, again, this check zone, if a plane leaves without destroying these or runs away, it's going to fire this check zone, which is going to force complete, tell them to stop doing what they're doing, and wait a little bit of time and then disable them. And it will also enable the first check zone, and so now we're back where we started. So in this method, or in this way, you can activate and deactivate assets depending upon how close your pilots come to your target or your objects, and deactivate them as they leave. And this way you can save a lot of resource utilization in your maps, because you don't really need to have things active unless pilots are right there and using them. So, yep, I hope this one was helpful for you guys. Thanks.